Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Path to Greatness Podcast. This is your host, Mr. Ndumiso Mndayi. I am the founder and director of Path to Greatness Podcast. I'm not the only host, I'm one of the hosts. The other hosts, they pretty much dabble in other industries, interviewing other high profile people from different sectors. And with that said, I am the founder and director of Path to Greatness, Never Give Up Academy School of Excellence, Never Give Up International Emergent Technologies, Andithanganqa Fashion, and many others. And with that said, here we have a very intriguing, very important guest. Her name is Sanguita Popatlal. She is a very leading thought leader within the confines of the Zimbabwean region. And with that said, we will also just give her the opportunity for her just to share her bio as to who she is, where she actually comes from, and what she has in store for the future. But before we get there, let me just read just a few tenets as to who she is. Miss Sanguita, she is an elite corporate strategist, attorney of the High Court of South Africa, and a national governance specialist. Her career trajectories from Sentin litigation at Boehm Incorporated as a senior and house advisory frameworks at the IDC, which is the Industrial Development Corporation, doing comprehensive risk advisory management for industrial manufacturing divisions at Omnia Group. Now she currently serves as the Chief Director at the Office of the President at the Cabinet of the Government of Zimbabwe. Welcome to the show, Miss Sanguita.
Thank you, Ndumiso. I can call you Ndumiso because I think your surname is a bit complicated too.
That we have in common, two complicated names.
Uh,
If there's anything that I may have missed, feel free just to really expand on your bio.
yes. So, I always like to start with the place of birth. I was born in Maputo, Mozambique, but grew up in Zimbabwe. I did my schooling in Zimbabwe. And, just by way of background, my dad was a wartime liberation collaborator. And we moved to Zimbabwe for its education health system. Um, and we grew up here. And then I went to South Africa. I studied at UCT. I've got a Bachelor of Social Science in Politics and Philosophy and a Bachelor of Law degree, postgraduate at UCT. I was there for about 7 years. And then I moved to Bowman's. I did my articles there for 2 years and employment law for 3 years as an associate, 2 years commercial law as an associate. Then I moved to Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa. That's IDC South Africa, because there is one in Zimbabwe, but it's a different model. And after that, I was legal advisor and I was working on their credit book. So from a litigation management perspective, but also advising on loan and security agreements and looking at credit risk. And then I moved to Omnia Group. And at Omnia Group, I was legal advisor to the Mining Explosives Division, BME, and also to the chemical distribution business, which is Protea Chemicals. And then I did a few other assignments. I got married in between. I had children. I got divorced 2017. 2020 was COVID. And so I've been through some trials and tribulations and my own personal challenges, and which led me basically to what I call my calling, which was the return to Zimbabwe. And basically I went to the president and I asked to be involved in the revival of Zimbabwe. And having a look at my professional experience and qualifications, he suggested the restructuring of parastatals. And in the end, it took about 8 months. I was placed in the corporate governance unit as a chief director, legal services and compliance. What does that mean? That just means the corporate governance unit is a creature of statute. It's formed under the Public Entities Corporate Governance Act. And Zimbabwe has an array of public entities classified as commercial, non-commercial, regulatory. Then there's also commissions which are based on the constitutional commissions, and then also independent commissions. And then you get councils, which are, your educational councils and also your health councils. So it's quite a basket of entities that report to us on compliance, and we provide some management and training capabilities to them, some direction. We also go to attend AGMs and ask a lot of questions on behalf of the unrepresented citizen, as we are, as much as who we represent in terms of service delivery and mandate and performance. So that's basically my role. And more recently, I've moved towards, I started talking on governance in terms of ESG, the G part of ESG, at conferences. And then I've just latched on to my real passion, which is sustainability. So it's moving away from pure legal into policy making and policy influence. Um, but yeah, I'm very excited about the future, and that's basically where I'm heading at. Right now, working on national ESG reporting framework for the public entities. Um, and basically also just working on a mindset shift, a paradigm shift into sustainability thinking, because it's really is a journey, as is compliance. And I think we can leapfrog into that kind of broad sustainability thinking, which affects every part of the public sector and the private sector. And if we
Certainly.
could combine and aggregate our thinking and our actions, we could find ourselves in alignment, which is also, as you know, it's personal alignment, and it's also public alignment. It's also at entity level alignment.
If you don't
So there
mind
are
me,
three parts.
if you don't mind me interjecting there, Sanguita,
Yes.
thanks a lot for quite a very, you know, precise and well articulated introduction as to your
Mm.
upbringing. That is
Yes.
primarily where I would like us to start. You've mentioned that
Sure.
you studied at UCT, and then also
Mm.
you come from a family background whereby your father was perceived as a revolutionary figure, if I can put it like that, if you don't mind. What were
Yes.
the aspirations that you had as a young Sangeeta at that particular time frame that you felt compelled to actually travel to Cape Town, go to
Mm.
UCT to be particular, to actually study law?
Yeah, the process of consciousness is has different rates at different times of your life. And it's only when I'm looking back, because one tends to look back at where you came from when you get asked these questions. And I was pretty much quite a pensive a child. I wasn't as outspoken as I am today. Definitely not. But I did always ask questions. And I remember people saying, you asked too many questions. You should be a lawyer. So I know I wasn't going to be an engineer or a doctor or things like that. And because I've always been intellectually stimulated and in a pensive mode, probably an overthinker. I think it was pretty much my path was to become a lawyer,
Mm.
especially because I have a very curious, inquisitive mindset. And, having moved from Mozambique to Zimbabwe and having to start in grade two, being Indian, being vegetarian, I used to bring my own food. I never knew much English even when I moved to Zimbabwe. So I was reading books in my vernacular language, which is Gujarati. And at that time, I could read and write. But for the rest of the kids, they found this very strange. I came there eating my own food and Indian food and reading my books. So I was teased quite a lot. And actually, I just turned around and I thought to myself, well, I'll be intelligent. So I actually focused on mathematics for a long time, um, always with the ideology that I would be a lawyer. And yeah, the words have come to me much later on in life, actually. So, yeah, but I was always exposed to the liberation movement, revolutionary thinking, socialist thinking, um, the concept of freedom and what it means to individuals, of freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom to be. It is quite a central aspect of my being.
Mm.
And one of my biggest values, I think, is freedom. You know, so that freedom conversation is almost a conversation on its own because and if everything comes around almost a full circle. And when I started looking even as far back as my birth date is 22 November, which is known as the Day of Revolution.
Mm.
Then 1974 is my
Interesting.
birth year, which is known as the Year of Revolution. And then I'm born on the
Very
cusp of
interesting.
Scorpio and Sagittarius, which is known as the cusp of revolution. So I'm triple revolutionary myself. Um,
Not
but
coincidental at
all,
all.
yeah, yeah. So having had a look at, getting to know myself better through my journey of life, I've realized that I don't always like status quo. I can live with status quo, but I generally am one who's a disruptor, who questions the way things are done, and to say, well, and be innovative and say, well, why can't we do something differently? Because um, I think I probably have, well, it's self-diagnosed ADHD. So I don't want to do the same thing over and over again when, you can go faster from A to B. Um, so I think I have enough of those skills to push, boundaries. Um, but then at the same time, having that kind of personality means that I am misunderstood, and I've
Mm.
learned to accept that. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy with people misunderstanding me because the disruptors do push the boundaries, and
Mm.
you know that out of your comfort state is your greatest growth, and movement towards unutilized, or what is the word, your potential,
Potential.
to manifest potential, to
Mm.
to become more of myself. So yeah, it's taken a while to come to some of these realizations. I haven't always been there, but yes, I've been always in an environment of people questioning about how government should be done, or how laws should be made. And obviously, my politics background, even the philosophy, really sits in well with. I would have liked to do psychology as well. I just never got the chance, but I
Mm.
have done psychology on my own in terms of my self healing and my own transformation journey. Um, yeah, and that's basically become the basis of self-awareness of self, and looking at your own patterns and seeing where your weaknesses are, how you can transform them, how can you become more self-aware. And that's not a linear journey. That is a link to consciousness, which is goes up and down and all around.
With that said, Sangeeta, you have just stated that you've came from the social justice revolutionary
Yeah.
circles within your family structure, and then at
Yes.
UCT, the liberation movement was quite robustly active at that particular time.
Yes.
What are the things that you may have learned from that time of your life that you could identify now and say, you know what, these are the things that were foundational to my personal and also my
Yeah.
professional development?
Yeah, but, when I started at UCT, it was 1993, I think, or the tail end of it. And 94 was when our President Mandela was freed, and I remember watching that on TV. That kind of tied in with the concept of long walk to freedom as he was let out of that jail.
Mm,
26 years in jail is a big, huge sacrifice, and he always says that you must always believe in something that you are willing to die for, an ideal
mm,
that you are willing to die for. So. Yeah, sometimes we are scared to put down a position, but I think as you also get to know yourself and become grounded in yourself, you become happier with those kind of stances where you like take on a position. So, my time at UCT really showed me a lot about freedom, actually. Because I was away from home and it was the freedom to be. In fact, I was so free that I failed first year, and I tried to do BCom first year, but
mm,
yeah, I needed that 1 year to actually just experience myself in a very different environment, and I was in residence, and I'm a very fussy eater, etc. So I had to go out to eat, and it was a bit of a challenge. I think I was more comfortable once I had my own space to cook my own food, etc.
mm,
So yeah, so I think that with President Nelson Mandela leaving jail at that time, I had the chance actually to meet him for dinner. It was Graça Machal's daughter's 18th birthday or 21st. And I was invited because of the Mozambican connection. And I actually sat next to him for dinner because I saw no one was taking the position, and I was personally introduced through the family, because I've also met the great Samora Machel long time ago, and so she knows the family, and so she introduced me to Madiba. And then I was sitting there next to him, and I said, now what can I ask him, because how do you make small talk with such a big personality? And so I had to think about what should I ask him, and I asked him a question which I never really received an answer to, and which upset me for a long time as to his response, but
mm,
I'll explain that as I go along. But I actually asked him, I said, why is world food production twice or three times that which it can feed the population or human beings,
mm,
but yet there are people dying of hunger? And he never directly answered that question. He told me about the electrification that ANC is doing, and how it's going to build roads, and houses, and that was a very limited response for me. And
mm,
then I realized years later that I gave him a rhetorical question, and that's why he didn't answer it.
mm,
So,
mm,
yeah.
mm,
So that's a conversation on its own. So for me, it really exposed me to myself, giving me all that freedom of thought. It's one of the baselines that if you cannot critically analyze something for yourself, then you are really part of the matrix, and you don't have sovereignty within yourself. Forget sovereignty of a country, etc. So, my path within only started like when I was 45. So I'm talking like this now. So don't think that I was just born wise. It's through my own journey that I've gotten to reflect. Yeah, and so I would say that that's what it really taught me, is freedom of thought and critical thinking, especially from the philosophical aspect of how you look at premises and the conclusions you come to, and what are you trying to show, and quantum theory.
mm.
It can get quite deep. And one day I would like to go back to philosophy, whether it's philosophy of language or philosophy of law or morality. It's still an open field.
Oh, well, as you know, is that that particular field is a field that really intrigues me more than anything.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because in every industry there is some aspect of philosophy and human psychology intertwined within it. And
Correct.
just by listening to your life's journey,
Mm,
your trajectory is permeated by different analogies of thought, right?
mm, mm,
Philosophy, human psychology, political
mm,
science. And I believe that
Yes,
those three are very fundamental to the overall well-being of an individual and also the overall being of a community or society. And speaking about societies, you've mentioned about three countries. You've
yes,
mentioned Mozambique, you've mentioned Zimbabwe, you've also mentioned South Africa. What would you say
yes.
the correlation and also the differences thereof between these three countries, whether at a local level or at a national level or even at a constitutional level? What would you pinpoint as the vast and stark differences between these three countries?
It's a very interesting point, and I think we probably could discuss this over 5 hours. But okay, but on a very cursive basis, I guess. For me, Mozambique has got that wildness about it. They speak a different language, and so it's not English based. So compared to South Africa and Zimbabwe, you really feel like you're in a different place and country. It was never a British colony, so it already has a difference in the architecture, and it has a siesta kind of culture. You take lunch, you go to sleep for a couple of hours, you come back, and then everything happens much later because you only close the shop at like 8 o'clock. So people are out at 10 o'clock and having dinner at like 11 and, dancing till 2, 3. So it's got a very different vibration. It was known as the Paris of Africa at one stage. And it's got a very sociable feeling, but sociable more in a European way, I would say. And it's not so learned, I would think, because the education system was not great in Mozambique, and I never went through that system, so it's difficult for me to comment on it. But what I can say is that I would never have been as educated in terms of degrees and analysis and etc. I would have probably. There's actually only one other girl who's left in Mozambique in terms of our family, and she also never really studied. So I often think that if I didn't come to Zimbabwe, would Mozambique have been a good enough, a stimulating environment for me as a woman? So that's always questionable.
Mm.
Um, and I only spent about 6 years, so it was more sun, sea, sand, and um, that there's almost abject poverty in Mozambique. I think at one stage it was the poorest country in the world. You can go there sometimes and people don't have clothes to wear. So, and then there was the civil war that affected Mozambique for many, many years. And because of my dad's involvement, we were in Zimbabwe then. But he created an entity called the Zimbabwe Mozambique Friendship Association, ZIMOFA, and he basically would take food to people, who didn't have food, because what would happen is that foreign aid would come, he would give the foreign aid, and then suddenly the food is being bought, but it's also being sold. So it doesn't go to the people who needed it. So in the end, he would go on convoy. He's, with army convoy. He's been ambushed before. He's seen lots of things with people's noses and mouths and arms cut off. So very sad, what civil war can do. And it's obviously based on resources and politics somewhere along the way there. And I saw some of those photos, so I was exposed to that. And my dad was always a humanitarian, so from that aspect, I've seen an African country go really to the bottom of the pits, and in terms of the corruption, etc. And then Zimbabwe was always quite upstanding, always clean, colonial. Yes, it may have stood still in terms of time for a long time, in terms of also development, etc. But I saw it in its heydays in the 80s. But then structural adjustment programs came from the IMF, and that really changed the whole environment. We had a flood, not a flood, sorry, a drought also in the 80s. I remember going with pots, and we would, yeah, literally get one bucket of water. And we've seen that side of it, but then we saw the side where there was hyperinflation and $1 trillion notes being, printed and printed. and the failure of the financial system. I've seen it, little bit more remotely. My parents were here more than I was because I was studying in South Africa at that time. So I was cushioned a little bit from it. Um, yeah, and so I was kind of, at least I focused on my studies at that time. And in South Africa, it's definitely a mixed bag. Um, I always say that Zimbabwe is a very spiritual, sacred place. I think in South Africa, there is a spirit, but it's a very heavy spirit, and I think you need to go through quite a process of sometimes things have to destruct in order to restruct or construct, with based on principles that you want to create. And I think maybe in the 94 with the Rainbow Nation and Mandela, etc., maybe it wasn't done. It was done with the right intention, but the depth of it maybe it wasn't carried out fully. So yeah, so maybe there's another destruction before the reconstruction can happen and
More
the
like
revival of
a
South Africa.
phoenix literally emanating from the ashes. That's type of analogy. Would that be correct?
Correct, correct. And that really represents my life because, I was in South Africa, I got married, got divorced, and after the divorce, I never got a permanent job in South Africa because I'm a foreigner
Same
and
here.
I don't count for employment equity, although I'm permanent residence there. So I never changed my citizenship, but even if I did, I wouldn't count for employment equity points, which is another discussion is how can I be a mother to three South African girls who represent employment equity, but the mother doesn't?
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so that in itself uh, was I consider what weakened my position. And in the end, I literally just ran out of money. And my ex did a custody application during COVID, and my daughter was self-harming, and my life literally came to a standstill. But I do come from privilege, and I acknowledge it. And I just went on a very deep spirit. I was already on a spiritual transformation. My relationship with my God became stronger, and I started listening to what that calling was. And for me, that calling was to return to Zimbabwe. And it took a bit of an adjustment. There was 8 months of quite a lot of depression, and I wasn't sure, and I didn't have any friends here. I had my parents, so that gave me a base, a good base. They fattened me up with love and food and things like that. And then slowly I've adjusted, and now I'm just like, wow, this Zimbabwe really represents a place where, for me, I have impact, I have influence, I have respect. And South Africa didn't represent that. Maybe when I return to, if and when I return to South Africa, it might be a different paradigm shift. But yeah, I lost a lot of friends who I think maybe I was looking for love in the wrong places, and I didn't, have clear boundaries at that stage, etc. So through this inner transformation, which then has reflected externally into my life, I'm now at that stage of the phoenix rising. And so South Africa for me, yes, it represented the place of freedom, but then also that freedom maybe it consumed me a bit too much, and I kind of lost myself in that, trying to become a wife, trying to be the mother, trying to be this to everyone, and then all of a sudden I wasn't coping with my own cup, and no one was filling my cup. I wasn't filling my
Mm.
cup. I looked at other things to validate me externally, etc.
And
And
then
through
that's
that
when
process
Zimbabwe became
came
a
up.
spiritual sacred place that you've just highlighted.
Yes,
You
exactly.
felt like
Exactly.
it became a token of consolation to you amidst your personal challenges.
Yeah, it became my, you use the path to greatness. I would say it's my path to greatness because it gave me
Mm,
purpose. Because, I was always like, well, what is my purpose? And South Africa represented the de-identification of myself because I was at the top law firm, and my then spouse was like, no, you're not doing so well in the law firm. You should look at something else. And that's how I got into legal advising. But if I look back, um, yes, my experience at Bowman Gilfillan might be slow to some people in parallel, etc. And I think you want to talk about this subject, but I would have been okay. It takes me a little while longer than most people to find my place. So my identification as a lawyer was kind of attacked, or I allowed it, should I say, so that I can bring the power back to me.
Mm.
And then I wasn't a good enough wife. And so then the divorce came about. He asked for it. And then the third one was I wasn't a good enough mother because he's claiming that, I'm abusive. So the de-stripping of my personality actually got me to a place where I'm like, okay, well, who am I? And the I
Mm.
am statement. And just the fact, there's a saying, how rare and beautiful it is just to exist. It's one of the quotes that I always remember by Einstein. And that basically says that if you're awake, if like I after the custody and stuff, but I was on that spiritual transformation. I woke up and I said, but you can't take away me from me. And
Mm.
then I started having conversations with the mirror, basically me talking to God and saying, well, use me as your vehicle. Show me my path. Show me my purpose. Then I'd wake up the next day and go, well, I'm alive. So there must be a purpose. So
Mm.
show me your purpose. And so slowly, the purpose kind of came. And even that's not a static definition. And also it's an acknowledgement that just by being alive, you've beaten what are the odds? 7 million to one
Mm.
in terms of consciousness to be born the way you are. And then you're a snowflake because there's no one else who's like you.
Mm.
Even twins are separated by time. Uh, and, it's a whole debate about how much of that destiny is written and how rigidly it's written, or do you have an element of choice, etc. From a philosophical aspect, I wrote a story on it, so an essay on it about co-determinism. That yes, it is most likely that you will do X, but you always have the opportunity, an array of choices, and then that array of choices, whichever choice you take from that, leads you to the next point. So yeah, but we can have that deep. That's so philosophical. We should have it some other time. That discussion.
I'm quite intrigued. Thanks a lot for sharing those reflections. And then what
Mm.
is, I know that you've mentioned something like the quantum theory earlier on. What is the
Mm.
correlation between the quantum theory and also predeterminism? Do you think that there is if everything is deterministic in nature, does that give it a little bit of more avenue and more ground with regards to bending reality, if I can put it like that?
Yeah, it's kind of, if everything is co-determined, it's almost like you can't, the two are mutually exclusive. Because if your destiny is written, then you don't have an element of choice. And so you end up surrendering, and you're not the master of your own destiny. But if you look at the two theories and try and bring about like a hybrid where you can say, well, it's written out that this will probably happen because of where you've been born, how you've been born, the family you've been born, but then you have all these other experiences which then affect it. So it becomes more malleable because, those experiences are through your choice. Sometimes, like, you can make friends with someone, or you don't have to make friends with someone. You can date someone or not, but the
Mm.
probability of you doing it is X. So then you will move towards a certain, choice. But I still think that there is still that freedom to be and do whatever you want. And to a certain extent, that conscientization, if there's a word, that consciousness,
Mm.
once you're in that conscious state of being, it almost like delinks you from the karma, from your behavioral patterns, etc. And then in that space, you can then become that, the master of your destiny, and go, well, what do I want? Where do I want to go to? What are my values? And through that internal process, you then, because that is the only thing really that we can control, is ourselves in our internal world. And then through that, we make the choices from, a more conscious point of view. And I think that that's where it's more conscious. That means that's when you can quantum leap, because now you quantum leap consciously. You're not just bleeping here and there. And I think my transformation for me was a quantum leap, because I always said that everything is frequency, and if you go high frequency based on your values and based on your own alignment, you start going a different path, and that's the path to greatness, I would say.
Thanks a lot for unpacking that so intellectually.
Mm.
It makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense to me, and I trust that those tokens of wisdom may encourage some of
Yeah.
our viewers to do some soul searching. With
Yes, soul searching, and honestly, Ndumiso, it's a topic on its own. I would love to do the podcast just on that, quantum theory, because I've done a bit of John Keogh. He's a Canadian author of Mind Power. I did the Mind Power course with him. I did the Awakening. I've done the initiation with him, and I've done Tony Robbins as well. So it is something that does excite me, that self and personal development, because if all these things lead to a wholer part of you and to reach your untapped potential. And maybe I'm an overachiever, because I'm like, I'm not there yet. Like, I'm a late bloomer. So at 51, I'm just about getting here, where I'm like, okay, I'm in a place of greater steadiness.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
And what I really admire about you is your blatant honesty, your transparency in sharing
Mm,
about your professional space and also some of the challenges that you found yourself entangled in within the confines of your emotional journey. You mentioned earlier on the
mm,
situation with your children and also the divorce, which I feel like that may have really taken a toll on you, at least emotionally, and also having to now find yourself in this predicament whereby now you literally have to go outside the country and look for work elsewhere. Do you mind
mm.
maybe just sharing as to
Yeah.
how that experience was for you? Or maybe just
Mm,
also use it as a platform to
mm.
encourage other
Yes.
women out
Yes.
there who may have
Mm.
found themselves in similar situations. What would you say?
Correct. Well, for me, quite a lot of tools worked. One of them was because I was very codependent with my children, and I was always cooking for them and being for them, and losing myself in my children in a way. So it was kind of, it was quite an extraction, almost like having a cesarean section, which was my third child, and for the children to be kept away like that from me. I was like, I was really, I had to dig deep with Mother Earth and kind of say, like, what is going on, and relate myself to Mother Earth, because Mother Earth has got all these things that she gets abused and bullied, etc. So that was one of the analogies I used. The other vision that I actually had was of a Holocaust mother, like a Jewish lady, where she would have to choose which one of her children is alive, gets to be alive, or even worse, see both of her children or all three children going to the gas chambers. And then I went backwards into myself and said, well, my children are still alive, and they're with a parent with, maybe I don't agree totally with the way he's doing things and how he's treating me, but I'm going to see that as he's going to be the best person for my children, because he is the other parent. And that really helped me. And then also coming back to Zimbabwe, Zimbabwean women are so strong. They go, different continents away from their children and leave their children with grandmothers
Mm.
to raise them, and it's a tough journey for them, and they do it, so they have the strength. And so I tapped into that strength. It sometimes the strength doesn't have to really come from internally. It can come from a different circumstance. That's what I used, and that really helped me um, to let go. And also, it just felt like there was nothing left for me in South Africa. I had sent out millions of CVs and nothing was, doors weren't opening. And I met this girl and her mother's very religious. And she says, no, God always leaves a door. And I was like having conversations with God saying, but there's no door. And then I think I found a little window that was open. And then I went on to another door. And then, one door led to three doors. And then three doors led to a golden door. So the analogy with doors is there is always a choice if you want that choice. Of course, the
Mm,
other choice is what? That I'm going to try and kill myself because I was still alive every day. I was,
yeah.
waking up and going, okay, God, well, I'm alive. What is my purpose? Where do I go? What is my passion? And also the lack of self-esteem. So because I had been stripped of that identity, it really got back down to, okay, well, what is my inner trauma? And the more I tried to lean on the external, the less the external responded to me,
Mm,
forcing me back into myself because I couldn't deflect anymore to such an extent where it was all darkness. And literally, I had to start with nature because someone said, God talks through nature. So I would go and I'd see flowers. And then I'd be like, flowers is, do you know, it's about 2 million years of evolution. And every flower has its turn to bloom. And maybe my blooming was not a session of blooming, it was a session of getting me to my time. And if I had said at that time I give up, I wouldn't be in the place where I am now, where I'm a little bit more solidified. I have a bit of a purpose. I have the status. I'm getting there. I still need to get my justice, etc. But your foundation is called Never Give Up. And I think I posted, I think on my Facebook today, that sometimes you do have to give up, but it's not really giving up. It's being resilient and being
yeah.
redirected because there's a very profound saying, rejection is God's redirection, protection and redirection.
Mm,
And that has really helped me. So that to such an extent that I'm like, every time someone rejects me, I'm like, okay, well, that isn't the path for me.
direction.
Although, I'm very stubborn. Hey, I'll carry on with that path and it'll still say reject, reject, reject. And then I'll be like, oh, okay. Finally, I'm like, okay, they're doing me a favor. So that whole never give up, it links in with fake it till you make it. And then I'm like, but I can't fake it because the more, my path is of authentic leadership. And I found that getting to my core self and then deciding, okay, how do I want to be? How do I want to be conscious? How do I make this happen? And a lot of it is not actually in the doing, it's in the self-reflection and the visualizing and that inner work. And then from the inner work comes that outer kind of attraction. Some people call it law of attraction, and being in that right mode. So I'm not saying that I'm a magician, totally, but yes, I am in the manifestation stage. So, I do want to be testimony because I said to God, I made the deal with God. I said, God, universe, who, people call that many, many things. Whoever you look, your relationship with source is what I call God. And I said, empower me so I can empower other people. And that has helped me in a lot of things because then it reduces my ethics and my integrity because I'm like, well, this is the deal I made. So far, it's going well. So why wouldn't I continue with it? So I try to stay within those parameters. And as I said, it's not perfect. It's not like I'm a perfect being, but I do know when my soul gets uneasy and something is not feeling right and the doors are not really, you're going against the flow. And that's when I say, no, 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 that's not where I want to be. I want to be in a place of ease where I'm flowing, where the
Mm.
vibration is high and things are moving in the right direction.
Thanks a
Yeah.
lot for unpacking that. So you are someone who strongly believes in divine alignment. You don't just merely do things for the sake of doing them, but you are
Yes.
someone that is always hard pressed by divine alignment and purpose. And I figure that with the very traumatic incidents that you faced within the family structure, that is that
Mhm.
that was maybe perhaps missed direction towards your own
mm,
personal development journey, is that
mm,
it's as if that you were put into this position whereby you had to do some internal scrutiny to find out as to who you really are and where you are actually going as an individual, not just as a wife or as a
mm.
mother, but as Sanguita, who she is,
Yeah.
her core nature, her core being. So,
Yes.
and I appreciate you for sharing that because not a lot of people feel very open and comfortable to disclose those type of interactions with oneself. But I figured that for this particular platform, it is what we are generally about. We're about
Mm,
sharing other people's stories of impact to
mm,
inspire others to actually go out there and go get it without fear or favor or any form of biasness. You've mentioned
mm.
discomfort earlier on, that there is no growth without discomfort. I
Yes.
resonate with that message very well because if you remain in your comfort zone, you will never know. And if you remain in your comfort zone, chances are you will never grow. So it was quite a leap of faith for you to say, you know what, I'm going to a different country to experience a different culture, a different community, and perhaps even a different constitution. And I'll just go there by faith and I'll see how everything will manifest. I think that that is a word that you have used quite a number of times, manifestation. Would you say that whether consciously or unconsciously, that you manifested your work at Bowman? Or is it
Yes.
maybe you felt like it was just something coincidental? I don't know where you stand. But if you don't mind
Mm,
sharing, could you please
mm.
just tell us about what
Yeah.
attracted you to actually go there, to actually seek employment at
So
Bowman?
yeah, I was on a study permit. So, when I saw it was a graduate placement program. And so I never thought that I would actually be offered employment. I just thought, oh, I'll just go for the interview as practice. Uh, because I'm a foreigner, they're not going to extend an offer of employment. And then literally when I got the phone call, I thought it was someone playing a prank on me. And it was the lead corporate agent, Ezra David's on the phone. And I said, no, someone's messing around. And I said, yeah, nice joke, blah, 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 put down the phone. And then I phoned my classmates who had gone to interviews as well. And they said, yeah, did you get the offer? And I was like, what offer? So that's when I realized that was a real phone call. And so I had to phone back. He's the corporate. I forget his title, but I had to phone back Ezra and say, "Oh, sorry, I thought that was a joke. That you were offering me employment." And so I just took it up because I've never been offered employment, right? And yeah, and I kind of just did it intuitively that I'll deal with the other issues. For example, a work permit, etc. And yeah, I had to motivate why it couldn't be done by a South African. And, with my diverse skills that I speak French and I have exposure to Portuguese, um, I could kind of, because it's a corporate law firm and those skills would be handy for international clients. So, yeah, I got a work permit and it actually went through very easily. And I started working in Sandton, got a place of my own. And it was actually it was actually more a personal journey for me. It wasn't as hectic as like I know people who have gone to smaller law firms where they're slaves. And to be honest with you, if I look back, the experience at Bowman's was very professional. They never overworked. Well, they didn't overwork me. Maybe they had a lot of people there that they had to keep busy as well. But I had a very good work-life balance. Um, and it was a slow integration. And you know what? I was always like, no, I'm not learning enough. It's not enough work and whatever. So it was the opposite for me. But, now that I look back, all those delivering documents, for example, you think, no, I'm a lawyer. I shouldn't be doing that. I should be, but you're actually a candidate attorney, and it does kill your ego to a certain extent, but it develops you as well because. First of all, you get confident by going to these places where you don't know anyone, and you've got to serve a document, and you've got to do acknowledgement signatures, and it's the small stuff. And at that stage, in terms of my ego is like, oh no, I should be doing cases and this and that. But you really, it's stripping away of the ego, and you get to do very menial tasks. But having now that I look back, it helped with my confidence. I can go and do anything in any environment now. And secondly, I learned attention to detail, for example, which I wasn't so good at. I'm a big thinker. I like big picture thinking, etc. And looking at a document for full stops and capital letters. But if you now send me a text, the first thing I look at is spelling, and I'll just tell you that's not spelled right, the grammar is not right, etc. So it does create a level of thinking, and the Bowman's thinking, it's great. They gave us a lot of like master classes, and we were taught by the old masters, I think his name was Peter Euster, for example. So, and it's got a name for itself, and a name doesn't just happen on its own. It's built on a certain level of etiquette, procedure, and the way they handle things, right? And I'm very grateful for my Bowman's experience. And I actually think I should have stayed longer and not moved out into legal advisory services. But that also had its advantages.
Thanks a lot for
Yeah.
unpacking that. What would you say to a law student at UCT or UJ that has many
Yeah.
similar aspirations, right?
Yeah.
But maybe not the same academic prowess or even the same ambitions as kind of like, using Bowman as a benchmark towards, an office or an administration within the cabinet or the presidency or things like that. What would you
Mm,
say? Primarily, I'm asking this question also because of the South African political landscape right now, which I could say
mm,
that it is in tatters due to the maladministration, high level of corruption in high positions of affluence and governance within the spectrum
mm,
of public administration. That is, I think in this time, in this perilous era, I think we need attorneys that actually lift up the banner of accountability and also moral ethics in that particular space, because those two things are one of the things that I can say that they have been tried and they have been found wanting. What are your thoughts about that?
yeah, it's a loaded question because what is justice? And actually, having worked in the legal sector, I was never comfortable with this having fees in terms of time. And even my own experience with the custody application and having to instruct lawyers and not getting any results. So for me, it's a personal matter. I think justice and a look at the profession, we should be looking at value addition and not just management of files and how much time you spend on a matter, because that doesn't always lead to justice. And I would even say that for any aspiring lawyer right now, there's such gaps in that field where we're not even having discussions about this, about how do we ethically charge people. Because for me personally, I never really liked that whole, well, I'm thinking about it or I'm researching about it. That should be part, because that also becomes part of your experience researching, right? But the way it's being handled is that every single part that you spend on a matter is then billed. And basically, it leads to a negation of a lot of constitutional rights, like access to justice, etc. So there's that angle to it. The second thing is confidence and belief in self and a unique selling point. Like, don't try to be someone else, because that fakeness will always come back and bite you, what I advocate is rather be your authentic self. I've always been myself, maybe a bit rough on the edges, and that because I wasn't so self-aware. So, if I could go back, and if I had my daughter who's learning law, I would say get to know yourself, and then maybe you wouldn't have to make the same mistakes that I had to make for myself. But also, there's nothing wrong with having a position, and you don't need to bend it for someone else. Yes, certain things, you might have to look at other points of views, etc., and then make a decision. So don't be rigid, but at the same time, don't be so rigid in your thinking that you don't allow for um, openness, etc., but also know yourself as to these are your non-negotiables. Just in terms of values, a value-centered approach to who you are and what law means to you. And sometimes that's, it changes according to who your boss is and the environment you're working in. And I know a lot of people, like I look at people who went to small law firms and got more exposure. And sometimes I look at that as, well, they got so much more exposure and they did litigation and maybe I should have gone to a law firm. So you always have that bit of doubt that if I was somewhere else, would I have different experience, right? But also sometimes, like there was a time I think I had a boss that I didn't get along well with, and she locked me out of the office. But I did get support from management, and I was taken out of that, and I was given a leadership position for the candidate attorneys, and I was looking after the next batch of candidate attorneys. And so they did give me an outlet, and at least that was the right way to treat it in terms of professionalism, which I really appreciated because I didn't always get that at other places. So in a smaller law firm environment, it's more intimidating, I think, as well. They don't want to. It's more of a small high school environment. I've been in that environment and I didn't like it at all because I came from Bowman's where they treated like professionals and they never asked for your time. It was always you treated like a adult, like you can manage your time, etc. But then the flip side is that you then have consequences to that, and maybe I wasn't that aware then, and I thought I'd made it in life. I was in Santon, so I was kind of high on the idea that I could buy my own clothes, designer clothes, and now it's 5 o'clock and I can go for drinks. And so, I did get giddy off that. But that was also the journey. And, as I've gotten older and through that and through becoming a legal advisor and then having kids and stuff, I mellowed down and, started looking at other things. But, to be honest with you, I wasn't as serious as I am now. So if they can get that seriousness at a younger age, so be it. But if it's not your path, it's not your path, and you don't have to beat yourself up about it because, whichever way it is, you might go the road less traveled like me, and it veers here and there, and it's not perfect and whatever, but you'll get to your place where you feel like, in terms of personality, in terms of who you're working for, in terms of what you're working towards, it all amalgamates into a melting point, and then that gives you the place you want to be. So it really depends where your priorities are.
Thanks a lot for such an extensive answer. I'm sure that
Mm,
some of our viewers, our audience, some of them are
yeah.
law students. They will be deeply and staunchly captivated by that particular response. And with that said,
Yes.
you used Bowman, this corporate law
Yes.
firm, as some kind of a benchmark to trajectory your career, right?
Mm, mm,
You've mentioned that you've learned things like a confidence, resilience, amongst other personality traits, right?
yes.
Now, what was the transition, the adjustment from corporate law entity to actually
Mm,
having a seat or an administration in the cabinet or in the Ministry of
Mm.
the Presidency? How is that transition?
That transaction actually works quite well with my character because although I've been in corporate and had these structured jobs, I have I suffer from ADHD, so I kind of work well in an unstructured environment. There is structure and there isn't structure. For example, you don't get told 10 days that you're going somewhere. Usually, that time frame is so much shorter. So the fact that I can respond with enthusiasm and pick up things without having to prepare too much is really a great advantage to me, and has been even in my legal advisory role. People would just last minute think about, oh, we need you on the deal negotiation, and some lawyers will, legal advisors will say, no, you haven't scheduled it into my diary. I'm busy. I won't, whatever. Whereas I'm always willing to go with the business team and get to know the business. So I'm quite curious. So that curiosity has got me through. And
Then what are the
yeah,
challenges that you're
yeah.
experiencing there amidst the curiosity that is? What are the challenges that you face in that particular role?
The challenges is the hierarchy. I've never been a great lover of hierarchy, and this is how things are done. Um, because I want to go and fix it quickly, and then I have to reel back. So it's taught me a lot about patience, and sometimes I might think, oh, I must just go and resign. This is not my path. I'm not making enough of an impact. I'm 51 years old. I need to be doing X, Y, Z. Maybe I'll be better in the private sector. So, the mind is constantly there. But I always get signs from people, and they always say, no, 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 just calm down, relax. We need you there. And the external validation is coming on its own as well, where people are like, we see you, we understand the message you're giving, etc. So, I think I'm in a place of influence, and for me, that greater purpose really helps me. That I've got a purpose in life, which is to serve, and to leave a legacy. And for me to leave a legacy, I can influence that legacy for the future. And I may not have my children, but if I had my children, I'd be focused on them. So the spin is I need to leave a legacy for the future generation, whoever they may be. It's no longer attached to an identity anymore. It's more the future of Zimbabwe, and what do you want to be known for? And then that really like drives me. And then I'm also getting to know I've had to learn how to just back down a bit and let things come to me instead of chasing so much to attract. And that's a slower process, but it seems that it's working quite well. It's you're not going up the street upstream so much, and it's more like making people understand the principles. I do a lot of presentations. I go to a lot of conferences, and I've been trying to say, well, this is the sustainability route. How do we do the paradigm shift? And people are receiving it. So that response in itself is very satisfactory for me, and that fulfills me.
Thanks a lot for sharing about your fulfillment. I would
Yeah.
like to really extend this, but I think maybe perhaps we'll have a part two of this
Yeah.
interview. But I do know
Yeah.
that we are
Where
hard.
we can talk about governance.
Yes, exactly. We are unfortunately very pressed for time, but nonetheless, I
Yeah.
must ask you this question before we go. You've
Yeah.
mentioned something about the future of Zimbabwe. How do you see the future of Zimbabwe? If maybe you can just summarize it in two or three sentences, because I have a few questions that I would really like to ask here before we adjourn.
Mm.
How do you see the future of Zimbabwe? And also, how do you see the landscape pertaining to the contrast between the Zimbabwean economy and the South African economy? Because as far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of Zimbabweans in South Africa that are looking for job opportunities. And what they are saying is that in Zimbabwe currently, right now, economically, things are quite fragile and very destabilized, if I can put it like that. They feel like they have left an economy that has been wrecked um, by maladministration and also by dictatorial or draconian forces that are operating at the helm. You've mentioned the word hierarchy. So, what are your thoughts about that one?
Well, hierarchy is actually a male system. The male species works on hierarchy. That's why I mentioned it. And I'm from the feminine class, and so my concept is that we should have more collaborative, and this, that's what I'm lobbying for, is sustainability, so that it becomes more integrating, collaborative, synergistic, and actually fits in with all the ZANU-PF, the Vision 2030, the NDS2, in terms of what is the impact we want. And Zimbabwe basically has a population which is 65% youth. And my argument, and I think a lot of people believe that, is that if we do not create opportunities for the youth, we are going to get a chaotic environment where people will just do whatever they want. Drugs and substance abuse will become uh, the norm. And then that leads to other, those are all symptoms, though. They're not the cause. The cause is idle time and lack of purpose. And so I'm really trying to move into that space where I can make real impact, and where there'll be real projects where, for example, I could be involved in a business in a box idea where, the youth can come and they can say, okay, you give them the machinery, you give them the financials, you give them the strategy, and then you also give them the right to fail,
Mm.
because failure is part of success, and it teaches a lot. And we need people to be doing things. So there is a movement already there. Government needs to is supposed to be the enabler. It's supposed to create an environment even for the diaspora to return. And I'm very well aware of the South African situation. I've experienced the xenophobia myself. And, recently I've even had to block a friend or two from South Africa because they like, yeah, well, you're a Zimbabwean, you should just stay in Zimbabwe and this and that. And I was trying to give a more balanced point of view of the Zimbabwe-South Africa dynamic,
Mm.
because there's a symbiotic relationship there. It doesn't have to be so extreme, right? And so yeah, so I think that the path forward is to create a space back for diaspora in terms of the investment. Zimbabwean diaspora has done extremely well all over the world. Yes, South Africa is its most immediate outlet in terms of, because it's so close, and South Africa has many opportunities. Your logistical system is there, your services are there, your goods, your manufacturing capabilities, but the arrogance of South Africa is also there. And the arrogance of South Africa is what is causing a lot of the problems that you're seeing in South Africa. And one of the issues that I've always said is, let's learn from our history. We can learn as to, why socialism failed. Why did Zimbabwe also go down from, its breadbasket status, etc., from being a manufacturer to being an importer? Some of those are global challenges, geopolitical. It's so much broader than
Yeah, it's very
just let's
complex.
attack a yeah, let's attack one kind versus the other kind. So I think, and the lack of education is also a big problem. And honestly, Zimbabwean people generally, like I watch a lot of social media, and people say always it's the friendliness of a Zimbabwean. It's a different attitude. So there's kind of this spiritual joy that Zimbabweans have, which make them a lot more friendly, etc. So more amenable to customer service, etc. in South Africa. And I was talking about the youth in South Africa versus the youth in Zimbabwe, and there was this, obviously there's issues of xenophobia and illegal immigration in South Africa. And I've experienced, well, I've always followed the legal route, and I believe in economic migration as a right. But illegal immigration does have certain factors which impose on the services of a country, and that was the issue. But for example, when I was in South Africa, I paid taxes, and I never utilized any of the free services. In fact, I don't know what those free services are. So it's surprising that maybe because I wasn't, I had privilege, so I didn't ever have to look for those kind of services that Zimbabweans are maybe perceivingly taking away from South Africans, etc. But having gone through my own journey where, for example, my ex-husband is accusing me of things, etc., I always think that don't lose sight of yourself, because you can't control anything else except yourself. And if you start going too negative and becoming violence has got its own attachments. It can lead to a lot of consequences that you may not understand. You could lose your freedom, for example, and end up in jail, etc. So I always try to say, let's follow the middle path as much as we can, and let's try and influence in the right way through ourselves first and foremost, and then we can get into the political landscape and holding people accountable, etc. And the parallel in Zimbabwe is that we are trying to create, the majority of us in government are trying to create an enabling environment. We are aware of the diaspora. Our weakness is implementation. We've got all the policies in place, and the intention there is development in Zimbabwe. We do need our people to return, because we need that market, and that population, to provide the skills back to Zimbabwe and bring back, the experience. And we understand that they'll come back with maybe nothing. And so we have to make sure that there is something, some kind of path. So, well, at least I'm aware of it. And I think other people are aware of it in places of influence. And hopefully our development rate is fast enough to absorb this, because this has been a slow movement in any case, and home is home. And it's not easy for a Zimbabwean to be in South Africa. It's not all roses, and we don't necessarily get treated the same way South Africans, just in terms of remuneration and in terms of respect. So there are two sides of a coin, and I would always advocate for the path of tolerance, understanding, and solidarity, because Africa has helped in the liberation of South Africa, and its true liberation, and its true its constitutional, the way the constitution came about, and the values enshrined in that. So yeah, so I'm a little bit less militant in that respect, and we can always work on ourselves, and not be so entitled as well, because I think, apart from the new generation being entitled, South Africans are perceived to be more entitled, just in terms of the continent. When people talk about South Africans, you've had a credit society for a long time, and that, I think, has also imploded. Whereas in Zimbabwe, everyone might be driving older cars, but it was never built on a credit society, which is a good thing. But the credit society is also coming to Zimbabwe. So, there's a lot of things that we can interact about, that we can exchange information about, that we can learn from each other, and try and build, the new South Africa, the South Africa for the future as well, as the one for Zimbabwe, and how we can leverage between the two, because through dialogue, through understanding, through coordinated action, and we're going to a unified Africa. There's an African Free Trade Agreement, there's an African Union, and generally, it's a colonial mindset of divide and conquer. And so we should actually return back to our, you call it Ubuntu, Zimbabweans call it Uhuru. There's an African community. That community is missing, and we need to pump back into it. I know in Zimbabwe, we've got a very strong civil society and church organizations, etc. In Zimbabwe, a lot of associations. So we are quite participatory in a different way, and I think yeah, we can learn from each other. So that would be my final saying in terms of youth of Zimbabwe and youth of South Africa. But everyone is welcome. Let's try and do it the right way. Let's stay in within the legalities. Obviously, being a lawyer, being aware that we have to control movement because of record keeping, etc. So if we work in that, and we work with that spirit of let's learn so that we can get to the future,
Thanks a lot for
a good future.
that. You've mentioned ideas of development within the space. I'm guessing you were alluding to economic growth. What are the factors that you feel like they are annihilating that sustainable economic growth? And how do you plan to actually turn that particular tide? Is it going to be through the agricultural
Yeah.
sector, or maybe is it also something within your confines of expertise, which is ESG?
Yes. So there's I think what I've learned through my journey, number one, is that there's no quick win and quick riches, etc. And I think the new generation, whether it be youth in Zimbabwe or youth in South Africa, they need to be aware that it's a slow curve. It's not like in the movies and all the Dolce and Gabbana and Gucci and that kind of designer way. And it's about being conscious of yourself and where your money is going. So if you're going to keep on aspire to Western standards of
Of
success,
success.
maybe you'll never even get there, and you'll always be unfulfilled, and you're not then. And South Africa does this better than Zimbabwe, but for example, of having your own brands, etc. So that's where I'm saying that there can be exchange between Zimbabweans and South Africans, where we definitely do learn from you, and we can learn more, and we can interact more and become more powerful as partners. And the second part is being more resilient. And resilient means being great in yourself and working towards your inner self, and then exuding that outwardly. There's a lot of opportunities that, for example, South Africans are seen as, oh, they're lazier than Zimbabweans, they don't want to go out there and get those opportunities. But I don't know, that could just be a generalization. It could be a factor of economics, where people coming into a more economically viable place work harder. It's a deep conversation, and it starts with the conversation, actually. So we should actually have a panel where we looking at youth from Zimbabwe in South Africa, South Africans explaining where the discord is, and then maybe even have a few Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe, and maybe have some South Africans from Zimbabwe, and then we do a kind of discussion point on that, to see where that rootedness comes from. But generally, I'm a humanitarian, and I don't like to see people attacking other people on any grounds whatsoever. I think respect is something that can get us further in life than disrespect.
Very well
So
said.
it's a mutual respect for rights. Yeah, mutual
A
respect for each
mutual
other,
respect for
I think, can
humanity
get us further.
and for human dignity.
Yeah, for humanity.
Mm.
Yes, correct. Because it's not
Yeah.
easy for a Zimbabwean to be out of their country and in a different country. Some make it, Some don't make it. Some expose themselves to grave dangers in South Africa. There was a pregnant mother that was just shot in Hillbrow a couple of months ago, a Zimbabwean lady, and she was just protecting her child or something like that. It was just really bad, and those are just some of the cases. So everyone's being affected by crime and certain factors. So let's have a unified response to those things.
Thanks a lot. I think indeed further dialogue is more than recommended for us to
Yeah.
really just delegate that conversation between the two countries and between the two respective citizens, Zimbabweans and South Africans, because how the situation is actually being handled right now, it is that from community to community, from region to region, people are literally getting beaten up.
Mm,
The stores of the Zimbabweans are being looted as a result. Their merchandise, their products are being taken and sold to
mm,
the highest bidder, or this just being racked into 1,000
mm.
pieces. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of movements and a lot of marches that are permeating this kind of message to say, look, let us forcefully drive these people out to their native land, because the stark argument is, the consensus is that these illegal immigrants are literally using the systematic services that belong to South Africans, and that being healthcare services, educational services. So most of the Africans, they are agitated because they are saying that there's no space, there's no room for their own children to fit into some of these schools, and that also that they're running out of medication in certain clinics and hospitals due to most illegal immigrants accessing the same medication that is supposedly supposed to be given to South Africans as a primary, as you know, as a primary service.
Yeah.
So
Beneficiary. Yeah.
yes, so basically that is where the contention is manifesting at this current time. It is that people have grown weary, they've grown very frustrated, and they have looked at these immigrants as the primary culprits towards, I don't even
Yes,
want
but
to say, I don't
is
want,
that to interject? Is that based on, I don't like to use the word fact, but is there empirical evidence that that is actually the case? Because I know that I used to hire a Zimbabwean helper, and she never ever really went for any of the free services, to tell you the truth. That she paid for her school education in private little classes, quasi, most, I think it was private, and paid for the services. And secondly is, are we balancing it with the internal workings of what is going on in South Africa in terms of, for example, maladministration,
mm,
um, and how resources are being utilized? And is this now just a scapegoat mechanism, which often happens in a lot of like Europe, etc. So, and cultural issues. So yeah, I would I would say it's probably, it may be a mixture of both, and there's certain things of jealousy, etc. If South Africans generally don't are not that studious as they are. I know this is a generalization, but the Zimbabwean culture of education is very deep rooted. Whereas in South Africa, you go back to education, and that was how apartheid fed itself, and the educational system for the lower classes was of less quality, etc., etc. And and people have just not really wanted to go that route of being educated, where and in Zimbabwe, it's one of our problems is now we're too educated and we're not good implementers. So, it works both ways. And that's why I said
it's a
it's
mixture of both.
really, yeah, it's a whole thesis of where is this discomfort coming from? The discomfort is coming from the disparity between the rich and the poor, the fact that the middle class has been pushed down, that opportunities are not available anymore. And for example, even the Black economic empowerment policies are not necessarily working. It only further exasperates the whole elitism. It doesn't get rid of inequality or inequity. And what are the issues of inequity? And it really is, provincial funding versus national funding versus just looting of institutions, and then not having that money to put towards the build-up of what it was supposed to do in the first place, and then you have a failed state. So, yeah, as I said, it's deep. It's deep.
It's very complex indeed. And like you said earlier on, maybe it will need a panel discussion, you know, from, both countries and amongst their delegates to really just unpack this situation. Because as you've just stated, that it is far more complex than it actually appears on the surface.
Yeah.
With that said, what would you think um, is your token of personal greatness? As you know that our show is named Path to Greatness,
Yes.
whereby we share the stories of people like yourself, their life's journeys to empower, to educate, and also to encourage others to actually venture in towards their individual greatness. What would you say to the youth in general, not just the
Yeah.
Zimbabwean youth or the South African youth,
Yeah.
but the international youth in general? What would you say to them pertaining to greatness, while in comparison to your upbringing that got you to
Mm.
where you currently are right now? What would be the words of motivation you would maybe ideally offer to them?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that greatness is a point. It's not a destination. Some people they say are born with greatness, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. I'm not sure which philosopher it was, but I think it is, and that's why it's so profound that your podcast is called Path to Greatness. I don't know where the R came from, but it's the path means it's a journey, and greatness is not status or recognition, and it's not you wearing those Louis Vuitton bags, etc. Because I think while those things are nice tokens to have, and I'm not saying that you mustn't have nice things, we all like luxury, but that shouldn't be your defining characteristic, that you go into a nightclub and you buy 3,000 rand worth of bottle of champagne, for example, because I know that that's what some of the youth, some of the elites children are doing. And I've never paid 3,000 rand for a bottle of anything. I think that that's ludicrous, and that cannot be our measurement of success. And so we really have to open up that conversation of what success means. And success and greatness kind of have an interplay between the two. Um, I think it's using your talents in service of something larger than yourself and leaving people and or institutions better than you found themselves in, and that can be achieved at whatever level you are. It's kind of also leadership in yourself. Wherever you are that leader. And yes, you may not be at that level that you think is great or is successful and is the epitome, but it's definitely going to get you more rounded and more, if you have that inner completion and inner potential, you're working on your inner potential, you'll get to a point where that energy translates into your outer world. So I think it's an ability to use your talent, your knowledge, your influence in service of something bigger than yourself. And there's a kind of selflessness about that, and even selflessness from a point of your inner point of view, that you might not be there yet, but as long as you're growing 1% every single day, you don't have to do a 10% change in who you are. You just do a tweak here, make different decisions every now and then, and start changing, exercise the word no.
Mm.
Stop blaming everything around you and whatever. And it's radical acceptance of who you are, and
Mm.
then from there becoming the person you want to be. And in that process, I think that it will manifest because it's you're attracting the successful part of you, and it takes you, for me it's grounded in spirituality first. um but you have a choice to believe or not to believe, and who to believe, and what, but there is also your subconscious patterning, and your beliefs as to, are you believing something that someone told you when you were 5 and you did something, and they didn't like your gift and your light, and so you created a misbelief, and now you now project that misbelief onto everyone else because now you see someone else's great, and that seeing of someone else's great actually shows, and you feel envious, but then you cover it up as something else, and you attack that person for not being great, but they are great. you know that's got its own psychological concept of projection and insecurity. So that is why that internal journey is so important, because we love to deflect. I mean, I'm guilty of everything that I'm saying.
Mm.
I've been through it, and that is why I can relate, and I can say, it's hard because you can, once you've gone through it, you can see the other person who hasn't been through it, and there's the varying levels of consciousness, and it's so easy to be stuck in the judgment and the uh, and saying, well, that's not me, etc., and that creates division. But in the end, it's everyone's journey, and everyone has that path to greatness. And we're at a time of grand awakening, and so the youth can really catapult. It's a force to be reckoned with. And in South Africa, you've got the advantage of numbers. So I would say to the youth of South Africa, especially, hold everyone accountable, and also look up to the right things. Don't look up to, oh, this person's got cash coming out of his pocket, and he's got champagne, and he's got what, 20 girls. Is that your idea of success, or is your idea of success something much more meaningful and personal to you and your journey? Because once you turn that camera actually internal, I think we'll have a lot more progress, both sides of the coin.
I think you need to write a book on what you just said right now. Name it after Path to Greatness, right? Name
Yes,
it,
I've got the title. I've
credit
got I've
me.
got the title. What?
Cre-
Queen of Failure, Empress of Success.
Oh, awesome. When is the book coming out?
I need to be pushed. I've got the framework. Yeah,
Now, now,
yeah,
definitely looking forward to that book. Look,
yeah.
that message is very inspiring. I'm sure that it's going to really inspire all our viewers, but it has really resonated with me because I've went through my own personal challenges as well. And some of those challenges, they served as a beacon of motivation for me to sort of like found this particular platform to also
Mm,
encourage people who felt like me or who may still feel like me, one way or another.
yes.
But I do feel like we
Mm,
all have a story to tell. We all have a contribution towards the faces of human development, right? In as much
yes.
as our
Mm,
our journeys are vastly diversified, and that we also emanate from different and various backgrounds. But at the end of the day, there's one thing that we all share, and that is a disdain towards failure. No one wants to fail. Everyone wants success, everyone wants to succeed, but in some circles, these tips or these tenets of prosperity are not so easily accessible to most people. And that is why we appreciate, people like yourself who come to our platform and begin to embark on sharing their life journeys, their life's experiences, and how they got to be on this path of their individual greatness. So with that said, Honorable Sanguita Popatlal, we really
mm.
thank you for actually being on our show and being such an
Yes.
amazing guest on June 16, because as you know, June
Yes, it's the
16
Youth Day.
is Youth Day
Yes.
over here.
We
So,
we honor collective action, and youth are a very strong, powerful voice. They're the voice of change.
exactly, the voice of change.
Mm,
And
mm,
change is what we want, and change is who we are. So, with
yes.
that said, we just want to give an earnest appreciation of gratitude to you for really just sparing
Mm,
your time to really share
mm,
about your life experiences, your work in the corporate space in Sentin before you went into the ministry, the presidency in the
mm.
Zimbabwean government. We trust that this is not going to be the last time we're having you on the show, right?
No, no, no. There's so much more to say. I mean, the only constant is change, right? So if we talk about change in itself, it's a long story. But I just want people to know that I've been through those dark spaces, and I'm not always in this happy, positive, optimistic point of view. But the ideal is that what is your legacy going to be in, what legacy do you want to leave? And then you start discounting it. And that doesn't mean don't go dancing and don't like I'm a piano or whatever floats your boat and makes you happy. And, but that it's supposed to be an inner state. And then as long as you keep filling that inner state of, and your soul and your spirit, you'll just get to a point where you'll be like, we don't need envy and jealousy. And because vibrationally, those are lower frequency. They've been scientific experiments that states of being courageous, of being at peace, love, freedom, those are whole emotionally higher frequency. And if frequency is everything, we want to be higher frequency because then we're creating a space we want to be in.
Mhm.
We're creating the new earth. Let's create the principles of the new earth. We do know that all that darkness exists, etc., etc., and we can work with the darkness. I'm happy to be, I'm pretty lightful, so I always say
Shadow work.
I can bring light to. I even have my own shadows, and working with the shadows is important. But also, let's create the world we want, and for the world we want, that's exactly it. It's humanitarian. We share the same things. We want a peaceful place. We want to leave a legacy. We want to be able to fend for ourselves and have independence and freedom of thought and freedom of expression. Creative freedom is also very important to be able to, if you don't have money, what do? You should be able to create something of value that you can, what do they call, you can exchange, for example. And that's where
Mhm.
your talents and gifts are important. And it took me a long time to learn that I had talents and gifts because you give away those parts and you think, oh, I'm not gifted, I'm not talented. But everyone's been gifted with talents, internal talents and gifts and passions. So it's a matter of finding yours, and that's your path to greatness.
Wow, that's brilliant. That's very brilliant. Again, I'm gonna say to you, publish
Yeah.
that book, and we would like to
Yes.
have you on this
We'll
show
talk about that next.
for you to
Yeah, we'll talk
speak
about it
about
next.
it.
We
Yeah.
build up as we speak.
Let's talk about it next. I would appreciate that. Now,
Okay.
thanks a lot, Sanguita. It
Thank
really,
you.
really means a lot to you. It really means a lot to us, having on here and on such a very special day. And with you just sharing with us such a very monumental and inspirational message of hope, of courage, of resilience, which I
Yeah.
believe that evidently these have been one of your integral themes throughout the context of this interview. You've shared quite a bit on courage, on resilience,
Mm.
on personal identity,
Oh,
personal
yes.
development, and also I believe you've also managed to redefine the very definition of success because people have a very pseudo version out there as to what success is. You mentioned the word success, they think of a
Yes.
Lamborghini, they think of a
Yes.
Ferrari, um, and those kind of things.
Success is your own growth, surely. And also it's rising after every failure. So failure is not a bad word that no one needs to talk about. In fact, failure, you grow more and learn more from failure than
It's a
success.
trajectory. Yes, it's a trajectory. It's
Right.
failure is a stepping stone. To some degree, we should fail in some things.
Yes.
One of those, we should fail when it comes to doing crime or anything illegal.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying? But
Yeah. Yeah.
foundationally, there is no success without failure. And I know that people, they watch content on social media and they perceive us to be overnight success. They don't know
Yeah. It's not.
the amount of
Yes.
hurdles, the
Yes.
trials, the self-doubts, the
Mm.
rejections, the disappointments, the dismay that we've encountered along
Yeah.
the way. They just see a
Yeah.
finished product. And that is what we want to achieve here with this platform to say, look, your start is not going to be beautiful. There will be hardships. You will be
Mm.
doubted. Oftentimes, you will even doubt yourself that whether you're on the right track or not. But
Yeah.
even when the odds seem to be evidently stacked against you,
Mm. Mm.
continue to remain resilient,
Yes.
as you've just said. Continue
Yes.
to stand valiantly and also courageously to say, look, with authority, this is who I am. This is what I was brought here to do. This is who I'm actually supposed to become. And I'm not going
Yeah.
to give in. I'm not going to give up until I see the
It's a question of it.
exactly right. Until
Mm.
I see the
Mm.
person that I was destined to become manifest right before my eyes. And with that
Yeah. It's
said,
the greatest transformation of self.
it's the greatest transformation of self. So,
Mm.
with that said,
Yeah.
let us continue, ladies and gentlemen, working
Yeah.
on our inner selves, working on those inner conflicts, those inner challenges. For when we conquer those inner giants, we don't just conquer the giants, but we conquer the self-doubt, the self-criticism, the self-condemnation, and all these facets that prevent us from actually attaining our individual greatness. Thanks again, Miss Sanguita. We will chat soon.
Pleasure. Luta continua.
Aluta continua. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Uh,
Bye.
end with namaste.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate your
Pleasure.
time.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me over.
Awesome.